Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is August 27th, 2025, and as always, we have got a fabulous show for you today. We are going to cut it short a little bit on the intro and the outgo that I add on to the interview because it was an extra long interview and I had such a hard time trying to figure out what to cut out that I just decided to let it stand, and you're going to get the whole bit. But be sure to stick around till the very end of today's episode because at the end I do give you a little bit of important information about what is going on with Burckhardt Books and with Book Banter Productions, and yeah, I'll just give it to you at the end. So let's not waste any more time right now. Let's get right to today's interview. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt, the amazing and wonderful Ching Stubis. I always like to start the show by just having my guests tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Well, I am Ching Stubis. I actually started my life in the shantytown in an upside-down wooden box my father built. And it was in 1960 and during the Great Chinese Famine, which killed somewhere between 30 to 50 million people. So I think I feel very, very lucky that I survived it as a newborn, as an infant, as a toddler. And now imagine me sitting in my living room to be interviewed by you and living a middle-class American existence with 2 children graduated from the best colleges in the United States in the world, with a house, 2 cars, and a loving husband. So my life cannot be better. Now, the only thing that it kind of improved my life is when I started writing. And I was in my mid-40s when I started writing. And it's very much kind of flowing from my heart. And first published book of mine is called Once Our Lives. And it's a historical Chinese memoir based on my life, my family's life and experience. It's about 4 generations of Chinese women struggle against war, revolution, and an ancient Chinese superstition, which seems to be unstoppable for nearly 100 years.
Having read your book, I'm really fascinated. How much writing experience did you have before you decided to write this memoir?
Almost none. However, I had a literature background. I got my bachelor's degree in English and English literature, which means I studied Chaucer, Spencer, Milton, Shakespeare, a little bit of everything. And I loved Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, stuff like that. I did all these when I was in Shanghai, China, in a school called the Shanghai Institute of Foreign Languages. And that was from 1978 to 1982. So that was a long time ago, but I always have a habit of reading. And when I married my husband, Mark, and we together read a lot of books, and he is such an avid reader, a wonderful, smart person. So I had a lot of reading background, and I enjoyed reading as I envisioned what the writer was telling me. But I never wrote anything until in my mid-40s, and my parents passed away, each in a very, very young age in modern standard. One was 65, one was 69. And my heart was wrenching because they all passed away across the ocean, and I just did not get to say a proper goodbye to them. And I came back, I was in deep grief. So deep, I would be sitting up in the middle of the night and tears would just stream down my face, unconsolable. And when my husband discovered me like this, he's like, you'd better see a psychologist or someone, a therapist, and someone to talk to. And I suddenly realized who was going to understand me. I may have to pay thousands of dollars just to tell my life story. And in a sense, I never really thought of what I lived through, because if you constantly dwell in what you lived through, you probably could never move on in my situation.
Yeah.
So I decided that maybe it was a good idea to write to myself, in a way, kind of record and to see my life once again. And it was also a wonderful way of being alive again with my mother and my father, and kind of going through the days that we had together. Now, it was very, very emotional. And some of the times that I just did not want to think about such things because they were too emotional. And then I did not really understand a lot of the things that happened in my life, such as why my grandmother hated me, why we never had friends, why as a child I would walk and see people I would know, and they would just kind of walk along as if I was invisible. There was no facial expression. There was no recognition. There are a lot of things came back to me and hurt me deeply. But through that process, it's kind of a perseverance in the sense of living my life the second time. It took me 20 years to live through a life that I lived for about 40 years. So finally, I got a bunch of stories. They were like swatches of fabric, in a sense, stories of my life. And I suddenly felt like I was a quilter that was trying to put a theme together to make this blanket beautiful with a theme, with a picture, and connect them together. And I produced my book, Once Our Lives. Once Our Lives is very much a nostalgic, emotional story that I want my readers to be able to put themselves in the shoes of those that lived through a life. And I think in a way, I wanted people to expand their own horizons. You know, mostly we live a life, we always think about our own lives, all the troubles and all the worries that we have. But we don't really kind of look at the other people, how big the world is and how other people live their lives. And I thought about that China was behind a bamboo curtain when I lived. And few people really understood how a Chinese family, how a Chinese child, how a Chinese parent live their lives. And I just wanted to open a little window so people could look into it and then put on their shoes and walk with them. That's what I felt I wanted to achieve.
Whenever I first got the application for your book to be featured in our podcast, I was a little worried that since it was something that was talking so much about growing up in China and in Shanghai specifically, and all of this, cultural information that I had no firsthand knowledge of, I was afraid that reading this book, I would not connect to it. And it could not be further from the truth, because your writing is just so beautiful and so lyrical. I was able to just completely immerse in the story as I was reading it. And the fact that it was in China did not make any difference. It was just connecting to the people in your story on that human level. And it was just an incredible story. I mean, there's so much heartbreak and so much just obstacles that are overcome. And the way that it is told, even though so much of it is heartbreaking, it is so beautifully told. It's captivating. And I cannot recommend this book more.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I think in a sense, I was a classically trained literature type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that if you're deep down, doesn't matter who we are, where we are 100 years ago versus now, the experiences that we have in life of what makes us happy, sad, what we have to struggle through, I think that essentially we all are going through the same things. So people can be inspiring from 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and they're still inspiring people this day. I feel when I was reading a lot of the older classical books, for instance, Louisa May Alcott,
Mm-hmm.
The Little Women. I mean, now I read it when I was in China, in Shanghai, and I could not be more bonding with the characters than if I were born in her century
Mm-hmm.
in America. Even though I was far away across the ocean, I'd never been outside of the country, and I was just reading the words. I felt that I was Joe helping her mother. The father was away, how little they had on all the difficulties they had to live through. And when in the 1980s, I was a tour guide for the Americans for 7 years, and people always asked me, they said, how many children do you have in your family? Which one are you? I said, well, have you ever read Little Women? And of course, not all of them did, unfortunately. Sometimes I would not get a response, which I was surprised because like, you're from America. You should have known this. But I would always tell them, I am Joe of Little Women because I was the second child. And Joe was such a strong character.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt that I was Joe. So I think in that regards, I really felt that my book is applicable anywhere around the world because our essential human lives of struggle, when a war occurs, when a famine occurs, when you lost your jobs, your feelings really are the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel.
And whenever you were giving me your list of books that you were reading as you were going through life, the different authors that you really admired, it makes sense now the way that you write because you do have more of the classical literary style. And it flows so beautifully. And it does have kind of notes of people like Shakespeare and Dickens. I mean, it has that wonderful sense of language.
Thank you. When I first entered the college, I mean, I can tell you poverty, struggle, politics, father in jail. At the time, everything was horrible. But when I was in school, I was in serenity. And I was in school, I could focus on myself. And I felt that it doesn't matter what books I read, there was a connection between me and the words. And I felt calm. I felt happy. So when I took the national entrance examination for college in China in 1978, and it was the first time it actually happened in the People's Republic of China. It was rooted from the old Chinese tradition when the emperor would call for a national entrance examination. So anyone who is capable, they could go to these provincial capitals or to the very capital of the nation, and they would take a test. And if you do really, really well, what will happen is that you will be chosen as a provincial official, or you could even become the prime minister, advisor to the emperor himself, in spite of whatever backgrounds you come from. So education was always highly emphasized throughout the 5-something thousand years of Chinese history. So when that examination was starting, I felt really, really excited because throughout my life, there was one thing that I took pride in. I was always a great student. Doesn't matter which grade and how bad everything was. I wanted to achieve one thing in my life that I would be proud of. That was being a great student. So I used my skill. I managed to enter the second best language institutes in the entire China. First one was the Institute of Foreign Languages in Beijing, and second one was in Shanghai. So I got into it. I had very little English background. I remember the first test they gave to us. I look at my score out of 100. It was very, very pathetic. And most of the English I learned from school, many people later on, I learned they called it Chinglish. It was kind of translated English,
Mm-hmm.
kind of awkward, but you could not really blame these people either, because if you translate the mouse quotations or the revolutionary slogans, and they did not exist in the English language.
Yeah.
Everything was awkward. So I pretty much just spent 4 years doing nothing except in classes, reading until I fell asleep, listening until my ears got really tired. and pretty much did it for 4 years. And my classmates and I would practice English. So we tried not to speak Chinese at all. Imagine in the dormitories while in school. And it really, really helped. I think it kind of essentially like a hammer and nail those words in my head. And I memorized a lot of Shakespeare's sonnets and the sonnets from the poet laureates like William Wordsworth. I really, really had a tough time, but I was a tough girl. So I went through 4 years and I came out alive and well, and I loved the literature, and which pretty much became part of me for the rest of my life, even long before I started writing.
Now, I know in your biography that you hand out to people, it actually lists in there that growing up that you and your sisters were ignored for being worthless girls. Whenever you started going into college and being more out on your own, did you find that you were viewed differently?
Well, there were as many women as men. Actually, in my class, there were more women than men because it was a language school. I think it's the same all over the world. When you go to like MIT, where my son went to, there were more boys than girls, even though the school tried hard to enroll more women. But the ratio, you still can see like slightly more boys than girls. Now, language school mostly more attend the liberal arts. Like my daughter went to the School Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts University, which was the opposite, more women
Hmm.
just inclined to do arts. So yeah, I had a lot of young women in my class, and so I didn't feel that. Or I felt that I'm always a person, when I'm in school, in class, I take a test. I want to be an achiever. And my way of studying was every day I study hard. And when it was a test time, I would go to bed way ahead of anyone. I didn't want to look at my notes or things like that because I felt whatever I've learned. I want to really test myself. So all my dorm mates used to laugh because I never studied when it's test time. Everybody was holding books, reading loud and trying to spell the words. And I would just ignore them. I would run into somewhere, a rock garden with a shade, with a novel in hand. And I would be spending hours reading and dreaming. That's what I have done at the time. So yeah, outside home, I definitely felt that I was just a young woman. I think, Mao, after 1949, he tried to encourage all women and men to be equal in workplace, in society. There were slogans everywhere. During the revolution, read slogans, men and women are equal. So it kind of get into me, men and women are equal. But living at home, definitely it was a totally different situation. My grandmother never liked me. My mother was never respected. When my father's family had any celebrations, doesn't matter what kind of celebrations, we were not invited. They would knock on the door. We didn't have any telephone. My grandmother's house was very close to ours. 15 minutes by walk. They would send someone over, knock on the door, and then they would ask my father to go with them. And my father would just change on something nicer, and he would just go with them. He never had ever asked any of us to go with him. So what's left behind, my mother and 4 little girls. So I was kind of used to it. But until I write this book, I didn't really quite understand the reason why. But then when I recall the life, I retraced my steps backwards, I realized that my father, the story, I mean, you guys have to really read what happened to my father. His life was taken even before he was born by a superstitious idea. And when I looked back, I really felt that it haunted his life for entire his existence because I did not know how to explain why tragedies, bad things, everything would have just happened to him. Now, I do understand that during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, a lot of the people were being accused for one thing or another. But my father got a double whammy. during the Cultural Revolution, he was being accused for anti-cultural revolution and jailed for about 7 years. And then when the Cultural Revolution was over, he hoped that something better would happen to him. He would get his money back. He would get recognition. He would be apologized to. But instead of all these things, he was sent to prison again for being for Cultural Revolution, which is hard to understand as a child. Knowing how much we had gone through, we almost couldn't have survived. We were starving without any income. But why would it have happened to him? I do not know any other people that have suffered his fate except my father. So that's why I put my grandmother's story in the very, very beginning of my book. How, when she was pregnant, how she was being visited by a beggar for 7 days, how she believed that it was a wandering soul. It was not a real beggar that was visiting her, that the beggar was looking for a host to come back to life, and he decided to be my father. So that kind of a thing may be incomprehensible, but Chinese Buddhist ideas, beliefs, their religions do believe in that people would come back to life, and there's a reincarnation process. So anyway, it's just kind of a very interesting. I had to be in my 40s to truly understand why I suffered as a young girl more than even most women have to suffer. Like when you don't have a boy in your family, girls are not considered to be precious. But without a brother, for my mother without a son, it was very, very hard. And also because of the superstition. So like we were the products of the beggar for his bad luck type of situation.
I really love that you put that story of the superstition around your father's birth in the very beginning of this book, because it really gives you an understanding about the cultural expectations of his life from his family's standpoint, that they all looked at him and saw this beggar, not their son.
Yeah, I think my grandmother always thought him as a double person. To the very, very end of her life. There is a kind of love, and there was kind of pity, and there was kind of a hatred, all needed into one. Now, the hatred did not direct toward my father, more directed every time bad things happened to his life. And toward, of course, the product, his children, like his descendants. All happen to be girls. It's like a manifestation. Anything bad happens, then it must be the beggar.
Yeah.
And it went down all the way to the very end of his life and the end of my book, how my grandmother and my father passed first, and my grandmother followed within 2 hours of his passing, and how their lives are so entwined together. So yeah, even being someone who was brought up without a religion, brought up kind of a question to everything of my existence. And yet, after I had gone through my past, I just started to kind of think, is there something to it? And I don't know. You know what I mean?
Whenever you decided finally to go ahead and write this book, how long did it actually take you to put the whole thing together?
Well, it took me over 10 years to put the book together. And then it took me more time to do editing. And, it's kind of funny because it's your own life. You just go back to it and try to, like, almost you couldn't believe how far you have gone through, what really happened. And your mother's words would come to your ears, your father's smile, you could see what was happening in life. And so, yeah, I went back to it again and again. And I also tried to query for an agent, a query for a publisher. And at the same time of the second 10 years, I became more a writer. I started to write a newspaper column for the Santa Monica Star called Reflections of the East from the East. And I penned more than 250 columns, something like that. 200 something columns. I've done it for like 17 plus years. So I started to write short stories, tall tales, essays, poems. I just started to experiment on everything. I felt that they are very useful, and because it's almost like if you want to create a masterpiece of art, all these famous painters have left behind tons of sketches, little drawings. So I felt that I started to practice after I almost was done with my book. I was doing the reverse way.
Yeah.
So when I went back, I actually had more ability to look at my own writings and critique on it. I'm also very thankful to my husband, who cannot be a better companion. Actually, my husband loves literature. His entire family just loves literature. So I showed my book to him, and sometimes under candlelight, we would just talk about, he said, I don't quite understand. What do you mean by this? Did you go through this? It's kind of really, really helps through the editing process. And I also, because he did not really know my past, even though we fell in love, we had children, we bought a house, we did everything. But my past was kind of locked up in my chest. So it really made him understand who I was and my personality and certain things. So it was a wonderful, wonderful process. It was very, very hard, but I can tell you one thing. If you have a wonderful story sitting on your chest and you really feel that it's something unique and special, if you don't write about it, someday you're gone and the story goes with you and nothing will be there. And what is civilization? Civilization is about what we record. Long before the words existed, people had oral sagas of all different tribes, different places, where they try to pass down a little important piece of information and make people understand their heritage. So now we have words, we have the computers. We don't even have to write with a pen on a piece of paper. How wonderful. And then if we do not do, I think we're really shortchanging ourselves. We're really making a big mistake about our lives. And people have like a bucket list. They want to achieve, to climb a mountain, to go somewhere. But this is about your own existence. It's about your family. It's about your history. It's about your country. And I think it's the biggest daunting task we have at hand. So I am glad that I spent 20 years doing it. And I laugh and I joke with people. I'm like, I can't write another book, spend another 20 years because my life is limited,
The one thing that's really great about books like this is not only is this recording your personal history, but it's also recording a bit of the Chinese history, especially around Shanghai at this time. And it's giving people a glimpse of life that they are not going to find in history textbooks. It gives an actual personal account of that time in history. And I think those kinds of things are absolutely invaluable, especially now.
I 100% agree with you. You know that there is no civilization, there is no history if there are none of us existing and living, right? So what do you have to record? Now, most of the history books are abstract, and they would just say, 1960 Cultural Revolution occurred, people did this, but people have no idea how actually people lived. So we are actually, as we live, we are weaving the fabric of the history, the fabric of life that put together to make our history, to make our lives, to make the world. So I think that it's very, very important to understand what the real history is about. Now, you can write fiction, create characters, but it's not what actually exactly what people you can envision. But when people really live through their lives, there's only one way of living through. And that's the reason why we still read Anne's diary. Not that it's the most beautiful literature in the world, but it was this person actually recording what she was living through. Could it be more vivid? No. She was recording in a dangerous situation, how she felt. It's the most precious thing that we can tell, we can know about what was happening at the time. So that's why everybody should understand. Some people say, oh, my life is boring. Boring is also part of the history. Maybe you have to change it. Maybe you do something make it less boring. Maybe you will find your life to be something you will enjoy more. Now, of course, when you have a giant history overhead of you, you just have to live. You don't have a choice but live through it. And how you live it through it, how you survive it, it's the most, how to say, daunting and the challenges you can probably go through your entire existence. And I do believe that it's very, very important that we always remember those things and to understand the world, to truly, truly understand China from the, what I have written about 100 years from the 1930s to the 1990s. And I really feel that being a storyteller should be everybody's profession, to understand other people's stories and do your own stories. And we are all story exchangers. And then that would make our world a more complete world, not perfect world, not idyllic world, but the real world. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together of our globe in 3 dimensions through time. That's what I feel.
I think another thing that's so fascinating about a book like this, there are so many people that I know in the United States that they've never left the United States, but they can read this book and get an idea that people in another country go through hardships and family issues and things that they can identify with, even though it's a totally different culture, a totally different language, it's on the other side of the planet. They can understand those hardships and they can see that that person is just another human being, that it's not they're foreign, they're a human.
Yes, I think sharing such information, sharing such book as Once Our Lives will help people understand that it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, in another 100 years, in another 1,000 years, that we would always identify each other, ourselves. Now, maybe we'll be one day living among the aliens, some people from a planet far away. But if you read that book, you really know, like, that person is a human.
Now, I know I am personally working on a memoir right now. And while I was doing my research in like my old journals and things, I was coming across things that I had completely forgotten about. And whenever I came across this information again, it like hit me just as it did the first time that I went through it. And it was actually like dealing with trauma again. And I was wondering if there were events that you came across when you were writing your book that was the same thing that you had forgotten that it happened, but when you remembered this or found this information, that you went through it again just like you did the first time.
Yes, I can have an example. We were almost killed. I was a child. I think it was about 1969. My father was imprisoned, and my mother was with a few of us. It was one of us was at a neighbor's house. I guess I didn't really want to think about such things like, oh, I almost died. Somebody wanted to kill all of us. So I never really thought about it. But when I was digging into my life, when my father was away from home, which was very painful, and I suddenly thought about it. I remembered how my mother held my hand to visit an old neighbor who was in control of all the street lights in our lane, and asked that question and how he answered it. And because suddenly the street lights were turned off, these people who were armed with big long iron sticks on the motorcycle ran away because they thought that somebody detected that there's something bad going on. And it's just those stories that come back to you. And because I put those stories away, I hid them away somewhere, I didn't really want to ever open it again.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I wanted to until I started to write this book. Yes, when things are traumatic, things, a lot of stories I didn't even put in my book. How I was almost adopted, and my mother asked me to make my own decision. I was away with a relative, a friend of relatives of hers, and she said to my mother, how could you hold 4 kids with no income? Maybe one of your girls would be in a better place living with a family who wanted a child. I stayed with that family for 6 months. Every day I was wishing for my own family. And in the end, I got back home. My mother pretty much told me, imagine you're only like a few years old and your mother asks you, you're barely school age, don't really know much, whether or not you want to stay home with the family, or you could be someone else's daughter and it would be much better financially off, would be eating great things, it would be the only child. Now, of course, I said no. This book is about 4 generations of the family, there's a historical line. So it did not really concentrate on myself, what my life went about, how I felt as a child of living with someone else I didn't know for 6 months. But yeah, there are a lot of stories came out, surfaced, that I thought about and asked myself what my life could have been if I just went away with the other family. I probably never would know my father what he had to go through, my family had to go through. But luckily, I went through everything with them.
Your story is just absolutely incredible. And I think anybody who reads it is going to just feel a connection just on a human level. It is so well written, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. And I am not the only one, because your book has been named a best read by Ms. Magazine, Glamour Magazine UK, Grand Magazine, Reader's Favorite, and won the Nellie Bly Award for Journalistic Nonfiction. So I am obviously not the only person who thinks it is extremely well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I feel very honored that my book has got her recognition. I almost feel like my book is my child, my baby, after some 20 years. And yeah, funny thing, people ask me, how many children do I have? I said 4 without hesitation. My 2 real children and my book and my dog adopted from the shelter named Banjo. So I have 4 children.
Whenever you spend that much time working on one piece of writing, I can understand that you would be thinking of it as your child because you spent so much time with it.
Yes, yes. I also try to make my book a very special one. A lot of the biographies and memoirs, people don't really use the real names. Actually, I used all the real names in this book. And I dared it because a lot of people are gone, a lot of people are old, a lot of people don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that after I'd gone through, it's too precious not to use the real names. I also had included a lot of historical photos, postcards my father mailed home from the jail, both during the Cultural Revolution and after the Cultural Revolution. So there are a lot of, I just wanted to make it a truly historical artifact.
I think you've definitely done that. And now seems like the perfect time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I just am really stubborn and refuse to stop. Are you ready?
Good. I am.
So, question one. I know you're an avid reader. How many books do you think you read a year?
Oh Lord. Sometimes I procrastinate.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read really fast. Right now, I have about the 3 books that I'm trying to read. So I would say maybe 2 books a month, something like that right now, because I also focus a lot on writing as well.
hmm Yeah, considering how much writing you're doing, I can understand why it's 2 books on average a month. It's hard to do everything.
Yeah, I actually have just finished the first draft of my historical fiction on China. So I just finished the rough draft. So yeah, always so much going on.
So, now question two. What is your favorite animal?
Oh Lord, my favorite animal right now is probably a dog because I have spent about 13 years with this shelter animal named Banjo. He came to me just all of a sudden 10:30 at night when my husband, who retired but worked as a chief communication officer for American Humane, went to the shelter after Hurricane Sandy to a New Jersey shelter to donate medicine and food. And 10:30 at night, he got home with a puppy. And my daughter was just heading to college, and my son was getting his PhD. I'm finally free. And there I was with a dog, but he was so cute. His eyes were just, this cutest little thing. And I couldn't ask my husband to take the dog back, of course. So I'm stuck with a dog every day. I decided to talk with him. I walk with him. He can understand the Chinese and English and little French. And so right now, I think I'm just smitten by him. He's close to 14 years old, and I wish him longevity because I truly, truly love him.
Yeah, my rescue dog that we got from Moscow. He was a street dog in Moscow. And there was a rescue group that would bring street dogs into Germany to get them adopted. And we've had him since he was 5 months old, and he is my little shadow. I cannot imagine not having this dog around me.
I think truly dogs are humans' best friends. And it's not just a saying. Actually, it's true. Now, only one thing, humans may not always be dogs' best friends.
Definitely.
And it's very sad, but dogs are our best friends.
So now question three. Do you have a favorite superstition?
Oh, I definitely do. Actually, it was because of my mother. But my mother believed ever since I was a little child. Every time when there was a spider hanging from the door, the middle of the door, she would just scream and she said, "Oh, we have guests coming." So it's some sort of a superstition. And then when she wakes up in the morning, a spider hanging down with a thread, and she looked at the spider, she said, "Something good is going to happen to us." So I always knew somehow spiders would bring good news, would bring guests, and something good and exciting would happen. So it's very strange. I do not know if or not spiders truly can predict things, but I always had just such a fondness for spiders.
When I was young, I always wanted a pet tarantula. And then I found out that I'm actually allergic to spider bites. But even though it can make me extremely sick if I get bitten by one, whenever I find spiders in the house, I always, am very careful and I catch them and take them outside. I will never kill a spider because they are so beneficial to the environment. I want to make sure we have as many of them around here as possible.
Yeah, I think it's like a Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
Wilbert, how life was saved by the spider. So I think there's a story I loved very much. Well, I think of all E.B. White's books, in Charlotte's Web really struck a very Asian tone to me because of my upbringing, because I always thought that the spiders are wise. If they can predict the future, then surely they should be able to spell words, right?
That was actually one of my favorite books as a kid. I loved Charlotte's Web. And that's one of those books that it made me so sad, but I loved it.
Yeah, it was sad, but also had a positive tone because of her, how to say, babies in the end come out, and there's a regeneration. It's like the leaves falling, the leaves come out type of feeling. So I was being, happy. I was happy about that book.
Now, question 4. Do you have a favorite family tradition for your family?
Well, I think my favorite tradition for my family is something new that we have established as our little family with my husband and my children. And we always try to do it in the holiday season at the end of the year, try to give children good, thoughtful gifts, educational gifts. But we always set money aside, gather the children around us, and write a check to UNICEF, Doctor Without Border, and telling them when they were really, really small about the children around the world would need something, have some food, have some help. And so they always learn to kind of share things with the world, with the children in an abstract sense. And even to this day, our children have already developed their own sense of giving. So I always felt that it's a wonderful tradition that we've been having for many, many decades.
That is a wonderful tradition. I love that. It's a great way to focus on giving.
I think just to kind of put ourselves in the midst of humanity,
Hmm.
other than just in the house, like what do we want? I want this, and I'm getting this, but I don't get that. So I'm still not happy. So I think it's very, very important, for those parents out there, if you want your children be happy for the rest of their lives, it is not a good idea just indulge and give everything, but give them a larger world, give them a sense of belonging, so they would always be rich with traditions, rich with meaning and understanding things. And kind of money is not just for yourself. The money is to put to good use type of feeling.
That's fabulous. So now your last question. I'm asking everybody the same question this year because we're creating a list to go in our year-end book buying guide of author recommendations for books. So when somebody asks you, can you recommend a good book for me to read? Who do you usually recommend?
Today, I probably say two of them. One is very famous, a lot of people read it, and one is probably hiding in a corner in the darkness, but extremely important. First, I will talk about the one that everybody reads, and I love it, Angela's Ashes
Oh,
by
yeah.
Frank McCourt, and it is a must read. It's so pungent. It makes put me right in Ireland, the period of his own life, his family, and how people live and thrive and fight against all sorts of odds. And I really felt as a Chinese, I really feel very close to my heart, and I love the book. Now, another one is that I think that being American, all Americans should know their own history, own tradition. America did not start out with all the air conditioned houses, computers. Thinking about the movies from about the Great West,
Hmm.
the movies in the movie, what people did with those wagons and going to explore the world that hasn't been explored. And I got to know this writer in the 1980s by her daughter. The writer's name is Bess Streeter Aldrich. She was American woman frontier writer. She was long gone before I knew her, but I met her daughter, Mary Aldrich, when she was on a tour in China and I was a local guide. She learned that I loved literature. She said to me that her mother was a writer. And as a matter of fact, the street in front of her house is named after her mother,
Oh,
Aldrich.
wow.
And she promised me that she would go back and mail me a copy of her mother's book from her mother's library. I was very excited. But unfortunately, the book was mailed to my company. And as a tour guide working for the government, I was not allowed to take whatever people sent to me. But I remember the name of the book and had the people of it because the package was addressed to me. And when I opened the package, it's called A Lantern in Her Hand. And later on, many years later, after I moved to Bethesda, Maryland, and I'm taking my daughter to the library, young adult books, and I accidentally ran into that book. I checked it out and I read it. And it should not just for young adults. This book is easy to read, like young adults can read it. But it talks about a young woman and her life going to the West, her marriage, all the adventure. And it's full of experience of hardship, struggling, whether from the nature or from the people, ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I would think that all Americans should be reading that book to understand really how far we have gone to make this country what it is. Not everything is great. Not everything can be boasted. But who is perfect? Nobody. That's part of being a human, being a civilization, being a country. But I really feel A Lantern in Her Hand should be something every American should read.
The way that you found it again after you met her in China while you were a tour guide, it's almost like you were meant to find that book.
Yeah.
Now, let's go ahead and remind everybody who you are and where they can find your book.
Well, I am Ching Stubis, and nobody can pronounce my first name, so don't feel bad. Qin. And if you play word games, don't forget, Qin is actually an English word recognized by Oxford Dictionary and every dictionary, just the same as cha, because Ching means music instruments in general. So if you had a Q and an IN in your hand and thought you couldn't spell word, you have a word in your hand. Now, in that regard, I hope you will remember my name. Sun was my original given name. Stubis is my husband's last name. So I become a very strange person with Ching Sun Stubis, and nobody can pronounce my name. And I am the author of Once Our Lives, a historical memoir of 4 generations of Chinese women struggling against war, revolution, and unstoppable ancient Chinese superstition. If you love a story that is more dramatic than a fictional book, you should read my book. And it's filled with a love, struggling, tears, and I think you can find important life lessons from it. If you Google my name, Ching Sun Stubis, you can find everything there. You find Once Our Lives on Amazon, in a bookstore near you. Bookshop.org has my book as well, and I always want to help the independent bookstores.
Definitely.
So, yeah, you have my website, chingsunstubis.com, and there you can read everything about me, all the awards, everything, and my newest ambitions. It's all in there. And I am truly honored to be on your show, and I'm a great admirer of your work, of the things you do. So thank you so much.
This has been absolutely wonderful. I know I've been kind of gushing about this, but I have truly just been thoroughly enjoying reading your book. I have like 2 chapters left to read that I'm going to finish tonight. But I took this with me on vacation when we went to Chile a couple of weeks ago. And in the evenings, we're all just kind of sitting around and relaxing. And everybody's like, "You're so quiet. What are you doing?" "I'm reading this book. Leave me alone." "I'm reading. This is good. Go away."
No, my book was in Chile. So
yeah.
Yay, thank you. Thank you. My book is actually in Turkey. It's in Botswana, in a lot of countries. And I want to someday have my book translated. into foreign languages, I hope, so more people can read my book.
I think that would be fabulous. I think more people should read this book. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This has been just absolutely wonderful. You are delightful. And whenever you get your next book ready to go, I would love to have you back.
Thank you so much. I probably will give you like an advanced copy and just tell you like, hey, this is happening. I will definitely do that.
Fantastic. So there you have it, folks, my incredible interview with the amazing Ching Stubis. I absolutely cannot recommend her book enough. It was just fabulous. It was such an engaging read and so well written. You really need to go check this book out. If you have any interest in memoirs at all, or just a well-told story, go check out Once Our Lives. It is absolutely fabulous. So now, as far as information for Burckhardt Books and for Book Banter Productions, if you follow along on our TikTok channel, you know that every week whenever I do an episode, I post a Manic Life vlog along with the information for that week's podcast episode information, who the author is and the book that we're going to be talking about, and who's going to be coming up the next week. And right now, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break from that. I'll still be posting some kind of little video that shows who's on the show that week and who's going to be the one coming up the next week, but I'm not going to be doing my part where I'm just talking about the behind the scenes stuff going on in my life and what's going on with Burckhardt Books and the things that I've got coming up, like the app that I'm trying to do and the master class that I'm wanting to do online and all this kind of stuff, because I really need to take a break for me and take a step back. If you've been following along with those videos, you already know that I've been stuck in bed for a couple weeks now with a broken leg. And while I was on bed rest and unable to travel, the person who has always been the face for Stephen Burckhardt for our books, if you don't realize, I write the books that we publish under the name Stephen Burckhardt. That is a pen name for me. I wrote the Into the West Saga serial. But if you go to our website, you will see that the Into the West Saga serial is credited to Stephen Burckhardt. That is a pen name for me. And I wanted to try and round out that persona a little bit more. And my father, whose name is Steve, agreed to be the face of Stephen Burckhardt. And as a matter of fact, he loved being the face of Stephen Burckhardt. He loved the story that I created. He loved the message in the books. And he really, truly enjoyed being the persona of Stephen Burckhardt for me. And so I agreed. It's like any historical fiction westerns that we write in the future, and I do have another serial plan that will come after this one that has some of the characters from the first one. The first one was the Into the West Saga serial. The next one will be Surviving the West. And my dad will continue to be the face of Stephen Burckhardt. Even though I am coming out as the actual author writing the books, they're still going to be listed under Stephen Burckhardt, and we're still going to use my dad's face as that author. And part of that is to create a memorial to remember my father by. Because August 25th, this week, my father passed away. And it was really hard for me because he went into hospice for a few days before his passing. And because of my broken leg, I could not travel to be with him. And right now, I am dealing with a lot of feelings. And I need to take a little step back and just deal with what I'm going through right now. But if you go to our TikTok channel, or if you check out this week's blog on our website, go to burckhartbooks.com and check out this week's blog with Ching Stubis. There is a video in that blog that tells a little bit more about my dad and has a pictorial memorial of him. And I'm also going to be posting a video on the About Stephen page of our website. So if you wanted to find out more, it'll be there. But for a while, I'm going to be taking a step back and doing some self-care. And I plan to keep up with all of the podcast broadcasting and doing my best to publicize all of the authors who are on the show in the next couple of weeks, because they definitely deserve that. But I also need to take care of me at this time. So thank you so much for following along. And right now, You know what time it is, right? It's time for you all to go forth and be really happy. Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today.